Alright, what's up guys? Doing another one of the question things. It's pretty late and I still have another 2 assignments to do on a Friday, so that's very fun. And if I'm a little less coherent than usual, I apologize, but as always, if you have any questions you would like my opinion on, leave them in the comments of this video and I will get to them in the next. And as always, I appreciate you guys' participation. It means a lot to me. So the first one was, would you consider doing a vlog on your daily routine with eating, supplementation, stretching, training, etc.? Because I've watched that. Yeah, absolutely. I would rather do that once I'm done with this semester and I'm back to coaching full-time and really pushing. Well, I'm pushing as hard as I can right now, but when my adherence can be really good, when I don't have random homework assignments, I would like to show best practice, not a compromised routine. Because I think there's more to learn from the ideal than there is from me making specific compromises based on my specific situation. But that's something I could totally do. It'd be very boring. I'm a very boring guy, but I'd be happy to if you guys want to see that. Just a suggestion, but when you have more time, for the videos, you should try to split up the questions into clips so that we can see which questions were asked or timestamps in the description. Yeah, I could try to do that. It sounds very complicated, and I don't know how to use a computer, but I can absolutely give it my best shot. Especially if someone pays me. That would be fucking dope. Any plans to release a free or paid program at some point? There are probably many people who like to learn more about your programming and can't afford coaching. You could also make some extra money, so it would be a win-win situation. Yeah, that's something I 100% plan on doing. I would like to release a wide variety of programs, kind of the way that that John Meadows does it, but then more strength-oriented. The reason I haven't thus far is something would have to be very I would have to feel it's very good to feel comfortable putting my name on it, let alone charging people money for it. But I would love to just crank out some, like, a variety of enjoyable $10 programs. I think that would be a reasonable price if I can get one that I am genuinely happy with the quality on. So yeah, that's something I'm definitely going to look into doing as soon as I'm graduated. Do you think heavy barbell rows are a great stimulus or growth, or too taxing on the body while doing the big three in the same week? I mean, you can absolutely fit them in there, and it depends on whether you mean heavy barbell rows as in a barbell row strict performed with the heaviest weights you can, or cheat rows. I'm going to say strict heavy barbell rows are a phenomenal exercise. Cheat rows, I think, for most people aren't the move. I think that the fatigue to benefit ratio is a little bit whack, especially when you're fitting them in with squats and deadlifts, and you really have to prioritize your spinal erector fatigue or your low back fatigue towards those motions that might be a little bit more important. I don't think those are always the best use of time with those things considered. And in general, I'm going to be totally honest, I'm not really that bought into the cheat row thing. You can use some degree of hip hinging in a Kaler or an Ed Cohn style row, depending on where you first learned about them, but I would still do those in a more controlled manner. At some point I would like to grab the clip off of my Instagram and show you guys back when I trained them, how I trained them, and what I would consider a correctly done style of those more body English rows, because what I try to do is hinge at my hips just like a deadlift, but never relying solely on momentum. So the speed at which I'm hinging looks very different than a conventional cheat row. And in my opinion, if you're going to do these as a deadlift accessory, that is the best way to do them. I think a lot of people just enjoy doing like true cheat rows, which if it's for your own enjoyment, that's okay. But I would rather if people were upfront about that, rather than saying it's some end-all be-all magical deadlift accessory, because it's not, and it's usually taking away more fatigue in your low back that could have been done deadlifting, and I guarantee your returns would be better doing more deadlifts than it would a cheat row. What do you think of people who specialize in certain movements, such as the squat, bench, dead in order to improve the most while keeping the other lifts the same? Um, I think that having training blocks where you place a higher priority on certain lifts becomes necessary as you become more advanced, if that's what you mean. But if someone is just like coasting on the other two and only doing the one that they're good at, you're gonna get me in trouble. But I think that's soft as fuck. I'm a big strength guy, and are you really that strong if you're not improving across a wide variety of metrics of strength? If you're elite at one and mediocre at the other two, are you really outstandingly strong, or are you just outstandingly good at that specific one? If you're not super high level, I think being a bench specialist is pretty lame. Same with a deadlift specialist, unless you have like a physical ailment stopping you from doing the other two. My opinion's that it's soft. Someone's gonna get mad at me for that, and that's all right. But it's just my opinion. Training differences for someone who's very light, 66 kg for example, versus someone who's heavy, 105 kg for example. Is it true the heavier person should train heavier more often? Is this something you apply to the majority, or should you train specifically based on what you respond to? All right, so going backwards, yes, you should train specifically based on what you respond to, but we have general trends we can look at, and I messaged you about this, I know, but I figure maybe other people might have a similar question. That is the opposite of what is true. Assuming that you are equally advanced, the 66 kg guy and the 105 kg guy, the 66 kg guy is going to be going relatively heavier more often, more times than not, because the absolute tonnage he will be using will be less than what the 105 kg guy will be doing, and there's going to be a little bit quicker turnaround between heavy training sessions on average. And you can see this if you look at really high level lighter guys are training at pretty damn high frequencies, and then we'll use a more extreme example than 105 kg and go to a super heavyweight. No elite super heavyweights are training with these crazy high frequencies, really. I mean, I'm sure there's exceptions. I'm going to take that back, but the vast majority of successful super heavyweights are not training these high frequency programs, because while your muscles you might be able to build up the ability of your muscles to recover in time, you're going to have a neural component that's going to be a pretty slow recovery, and you're also going to have like soft tissue components like ligaments, tendons, joints that well, man, it's debatable. You can't really train those to recover much faster. You can get them stronger, but the recovery between sessions, you can't get that outstandingly fast like you could with muscles. Because when you're untrained, you have very few satellite cells in your muscles, which are the cells that when you damage them, those are what signal for repair. The more you train, the more satellite cells you have in the muscle, so the better you signal the repair, and the better you get at repairing said muscles. That's why your work capacity will increase with training. Muscles have that like sick adaptive response. Tendons do not, to anywhere near the same degree. For general populations and from a health perspective, should constantly be in a surplus of calories until goal body weight, or have surplus phases and then maintenance and so on? Okay, well, so what I would recommend is, speaking generally, when you get above a certain body fat range, your nutrient partitioning is going to get worse. What that means more specifically is once you have a certain amount of fat on you, any additional weight you gain is going to be more likely to be fat than it is muscle, right? So your body uses a caloric surplus more efficiently when you are a little bit leaner. So what I would recommend for most people is doing a moderate to smaller deficit, gradually gaining weight. Once you accumulate a certain amount of body fat, I would say, once you get above 15%, once your abs are gone, I would do a small and conservative cut until you're back within that range, and then resume bulking. A lot of people call these mini cuts. You can read Mike Israel's mini cut Bible if you want to kind of learn about that. But the main thing is you don't want to continue bulking indefinitely when you're getting into these ranges that more and more likely it's going to be fat. How that looks in practical application is going to depend on the size of the surplus. So if you're someone who's very impatient, you put yourself in a 1,000 calorie surplus, you're going to have to be cutting again very soon. You're probably going to spend more time cutting than you are bulking. And if you go really, really slow, you could probably go months and months and months and months, maybe even a year before you need to do a mini cut, and then another year if you're gaining weight really gradually. So to some degree, that's personal preference. I think it's important for you guys to remember, though, there is a harsh limit to the rate at which you can gain muscle. So if you're gaining 5 pounds every couple weeks, more than likely that is not muscle if you're even remotely advanced. The majority of it isn't muscle. If you're gaining like, oh, I've 7 pounds this month, 7 pounds next month, that's not muscle, man. There's like maybe you walked away with 1, maybe 2 pounds of muscle there. So it's like you should set your rate of weight gain to something that's realistic to what at least could be largely gained in muscle. You're not really doing yourself any favors by thrashing your insulin sensitivity and nutrient partitioning by trying to dream a bulk, because your health is going to get bad, your work capacity is going to suffer, you're going to feel like shit. Gradually you're going to hate training because you're fat. You're going to associate getting stronger with being obese, and you're either going to burn out or you're going to have to then cut like 100 pounds down the line and lose a lot of the strength you gained by gaining that 100 pounds. It's not a good game to play, in my opinion, and it very rarely seems to work out well. Most of the guys who I've seen who over rely on weight gain to gain strength down the line have to lose weight for health reasons, or they come to dislike the training process because they associate being stronger with gaining weight, and those two things are the same thing, so they no longer like it. And I would argue, if you had two guys, let's say you have two 200-pound males, right, and one of them really just like, he's like, oh, being strong is everything to me, and he bulks 100 pounds over the next year and a half, and he's 300, and it's a sloppy 300. That guy will see some very crazy strength gains. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, that is a very, very, very rapid way to gain strength. To be in these huge caloric surpluses for extended periods of time. Eventually his health is going to start to compromise, and it might even really start to thrash his performance, and he's going to have to cut down. So let's say he goes from 200 to 300, and then he depression gets to him, he's doesn't like his body image, for whatever reason he's going to have to reduce his body weight. He is going to strip down to, let's say he's got 250 pounds of leanish mass. Well, when he's cutting that giant chunk of weight, 50 plus pounds, he's going to lose at least some of his muscle, and he's going to end up 240. The other guy, had he been in a smaller surplus and done things the right way, as I pitched them, or at least what I believe to be the right way, that guy, in the same period of time, I think could have gotten to 250 in a better body composition, and would end up stronger than the first guy post-cut, because when you rely heavily on weight gain to drive your strength progression, your strength becomes very tied to your body weight. If you're someone who relies on training to drive your strength progression, then you might be able to fiddle with your body weight and you're still able to replicate your strength results. But if you know someone who's bulked heavily to really boost their strength, you'll notice that their lifts will tank when they lose weight, and everyone tells themselves, they're like, oh, I've got a lot of fat to lose, I'll be able to drop all this fat and keep my muscle, and I'll be able to lift similar weights because muscle is what lifts the weight. But for whatever reason, their strength ends up being very tied to that excess body weight, and as it comes down, their bench deflates, their squat deflates, leverage changes aside, it just seems to go away. I've seen it quite a few times, so I think it's just something to be wary of if you're someone who's very passionate about getting strong. Don't let that mislead you into doing it the easier way, because it actually isn't better more often than not. This one is, does a small ass indicate glute weakness? So that's a broader question that I think is a really good one. Is a muscle being physically small indicative of weakness? Oftentimes, yes. It's very rare that you'll see someone with giant lats and their lats are weak. And when you address a weakness, that muscle will more than likely grow. But that being said, there are certain genetic things where there's some people with very strong calves with small calves. There's some people with small arms whose triceps are extremely strong. So to some degree, it can inform your decision, but it can inform your assessment of what is weak, but I would not make it the only thing you're basing it on. I would look at some performance metrics as well as, the eye test. So yeah, it's I don't know. It can inform your decision, but no, it does not indicate it necessarily. I compete in powerlifting. Should I stick with my usual hand width, pinky on the line, or move to a max legal width to reduce ROM for powerlifting? I kind of touched on that one as you mentioned in your reply comment. You saw that I touched on it. The answer is no. If you press more like that, you feel more comfortable like that, and you're getting stronger, no, I wouldn't. I think there's a lot of very, very good lifters who bench inside the max comp grip. So it's not this cut and dry thing that a lot of people like to put forward, that it is better simply because the ROM is smaller. And then the final one is, why is it that a 5-second pause bench is harder than a 1-second pause bench? I understand that one is longer than the other, but they are both coming to a complete pause, so why is that so much harder? Oh, well, that's a relatively simple one. So, like, you bring the weight down, that is the eccentric phase of the lift. You pause it on your chest. The weight is not sitting on your sternum. The weight is still being suspended by the muscles in your pecs, right? They're still contracting to support that weight. So they go from an eccentric contraction to an isometric contraction, but they're contracting that whole time, and you're using up, free floating ATP, you're using up your creatine phosphate stores, you're burning energy still, just holding the weight, right? It's a good example would just be like if you held a curl halfway up, that is also an isometric contraction, and the longer you hold it, the harder it gets. It's much the same. It's just people have a little bit harder time imagining that in the bench press. A deadlift would be another example. It's like you pause it at your knee, you pause it for 10 seconds, it's going to be a lot harder to pause it at 5 seconds because you're giving up position gradually as your muscle fatigues because it is contracting that whole time. I hope that helps. It's like, put simply, you could also say, okay, of course, a really slow negative is going to be weaker than a normal length negative because you're burning energy. Just because it's a different kind of contraction doesn't change that general property. Hope this one was alright. I'm really tired. I really might be rambling, and I apologize if this one's a dip in quality at all, but I needed a study break anyway.